How's it going, people? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to 8 reasons why cars are getting bigger. If you've been following the channel for a while, you know I like cars, you know I like car trends, and so I thought, why not spend the year explaining some car trends that we've seen over the last sort of 10 years. And where better to start than at cars just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Look at cars from the 1970s, for example, and compare them to today, and what you will find is that the 70s cars, even the ones that were supposedly bigger, are smaller than today's small cars. A good example of that would be the Mark I Golf, which is actually smaller as a car than the VW Polos of today. And in the hierarchy of VWs, Golfs are supposed to be bigger than Polos. That's just how it works. So I've done some research, I found some reasons why I think cars are getting bigger, and I'm going to let you know them. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff, and without further ado, let's get into the video. Reason number 1, a pretty obvious one, safety features. Since the 1930s, cars have been getting better and better in terms of their safety. In the 1930s, you had laminated windscreens come in and stuff like that to protect the driver from the wind and rocks and all that kind of stuff. The 1940s and 50s had the introduction of seat belts as well as airbags, which then evolved in and of themselves. Moving on from that, you've got anti-lock braking and power steering, as well as obviously just the general regulation changes when it comes to crumple zones. In order for cars to pass impact tests that we have today, they have to have a certain amount of controllable crumple zone or controllably crushable bodywork. This is all to protect drivers and pedestrians from dying, I guess, in car crashes. And with all of these new features, space is required. You need space to fit the electronics in, to handle your ABS systems, to handle your power steering, to handle your lane assists. You need space for the car to crush into when it hits something. When you didn't have to think about controllably crushable bodywork, you had cars like the original Mini. Tiny, the crumple zone is your face, you're not likely to come out unscathed if you have a big crash in it. Versus today we have the new Minis, which are much bigger and not mini particularly in size, but they are still Minis apparently. The key difference is that you're probably going to get away much better in that car than you are in the old Minis when it comes to a crash. In 2019, the safest car on the roads according to Euro NCAP was the Mazda CX-30, and that is a big car. Even though it's a compact SUV or whatever, it's still a big car, and that's why it was able to get a 99% safety rating. Anyway, that was a nice and simple one to start off with. Let's get on to number 2. So reason why cars are getting bigger, number 2, we have different expectations and perceptions of what cars are supposed to do. In the past, at least in the UK and also around Europe and a bit of the US, it was quite likely that people would have 2 cars rather than one. They would have one car which was there daily. It was a small runaround that would do the short trips into the city, short trips to and from work, nothing particularly long. It was just a nice little daily car. And then if they wanted to take a long journey somewhere, maybe they were driving away for the weekend or whatever it was, they would have a bigger car like an estate, or in the US you'd call it a wagon. That's not how we see cars today. Today we want cars that are more versatile. We want a car that can do pretty much everything. That long journey, that short journey, the city driving, the countryside driving, all in one package. It needs to be good for the family, it needs to be good in bad road conditions, it needs to be good in good road conditions, it needs to be fun, it needs to be luxurious, it needs to be all these different things. And with more things often comes more size. That's just how it works. You can't expect a car to fit more purposes and be smaller, as a general rule at least. On top of that, and kind of to the same point as well, we want more stuff in our cars. We want entertainment systems, we want nice big speakers, we want nice seats that we can sit in that make us feel comfortable. We want space to fit booster seats and children's seats, and then have all of the other good stuff that I mentioned previously. We want all of that, and we want to feel nice and comfortable. And how do we achieve that? More space. Can you imagine trying to fit Tesla's infotainment system with that big screen into a car like a Mark I Golf? It would be huge. It would be like you're sitting there in your seat and you've got this massive thing next to you, like half the size of the car it would seem. In the past, even the days where you just had cassette tapes and that kind of stuff, there were cars that didn't even come with radios. Nowadays, think of a car that you can buy that doesn't have a radio in it that isn't a high performance car. I have no idea, off the top of my head at least. So basically part of the problem is what we want. We want stuff in our cars that automatically makes them big. That leads me sort of onto the third point, which is the 4x4 or the SUV revolution. SUVs, or sport utility vehicles, are basically big family cars. I mentioned previously the versatility of cars, and they're supposed to be quite versatile in terms of going off-road and on-road and fitting the whole family and getting to sporting events, fitting sports equipment into them, all that good stuff. In the past, that would have been cars like the Land Rover Defender. Big cars, yes, but not absolutely huge. They were 4x4s, they were rugged, you could change the parts on them, they were used in the military, they were very, very useful, utilitous cars, hence the sport utility vehicle. For whatever reason, we the people decided that we wanted cars that were the same kind of size as those. They didn't necessarily have to be as good off-road as a Defender, but they needed to have the same kind of size. They needed to also just be useful and share some of the abilities with those cars. And I'm not talking about the F series, like the F-150s, etc. that you see in the US. I'm talking specifically about SUVs. So at this point, we're talking Nissan Qashqai or VW Touareg and that kind of stuff. And as there was an increasing demand for these larger cars, so manufacturers continued to make these larger cars and then also realized that if we kept buying these larger cars, why not start making some of the other cars a bit larger too? Not necessarily always making them larger, but at least applying some of the similar styling points, and that helped to kind of build this idea that there's these large, utilitous and helpful vehicles that fit families in them. Regarding those smaller cars getting SUV stylings, a perfect example is the Polo Dune. The Polo, as I mentioned before, is a small car, and yet here it is in this sort of off-road spec to be more utilitous and more usable and more rugged and bigger. If manufacturers spot a trend in the market, you know they're going to jump on it. Their stakeholders want them to make money. In fact, in 2018, 36% of cars sold were SUVs, more than any other type of car sold. And if a bunch of people are buying SUVs and larger cars, then manufacturers are going to make SUVs and larger cars so that they can sell them, make their shareholders happy, and then make more cars and make more money. It's literally just business 101. I mean, it'd be quite difficult to be the CEO of VW, for example, go to your shareholders at the end of the year having not made any SUVs and be like, so we spotted this trend in the market where everyone was using SUVs and we thought maybe it'd be a good idea to make them, but then we decided actually, we didn't want to do that. And then that's the reason why we haven't got good profits for you this year. I'm really sorry. It's just poor business acumen, basically. That business acumen is the reason why you have SUVs from companies like Porsche. I've said it in a previous video, but the Cayenne was actually brought in because Porsche spotted that most people that had Porsches like 911s or Caymans, etc., also had an SUV as their other car. So they thought, well, if they've got one Porsche, why can't they have two Porsches? So they can have a 911 and a Cayenne. Jobs are good. And there are another whole bunch of manufacturers that have been making 4x4s and SUVs that just never would have made them in the past. For example, Alfa Romeo, Rolls-Royce with the Cullinan, and let's not forget Bentley with the Bentayga. All of them just want to make money. It's simple. Reason number 4, and very much linked to number 3, with the influx of multiple SUVs and more competition in that market, prices of SUVs shot downwards. On top of that, in the same kind of period, finance deals have gotten better and better, and at least in the UK and Europe, we've gotten more inclined to finance our cars. For that reason, not only are people better able to buy cars they can fit their shopping into the boots of, they also just feel like they get more car for their money. Bigger car, less money, they're gassed. Reason number 5, and it's a pretty crude one, but size does actually matter. Or at least to us as humans, we seem to believe that it does matter. Often we attach the ideas of success and wealth to larger things. For example, skyscrapers. In the US in New York, the skyscraper race to get the tallest skyscraper was all about power and wealth and status. Diamond engagement rings. Your girlfriend's going to be way more gassed with a big diamond than with a little diamond because it just makes them look more rich. Bank balance. It's a pretty simple one. Even YouTube and Instagram following, so you should go and subscribe and follow me on Instagram because it will make me look more successful. Big is a status thing. If you apply it to the car world, there is a reason why Rolls-Royce don't make hatchbacks. I mean, unless the Cullinan kind of counts as a hatchback, but you know what I mean, not small hatchbacks. Bentley, they don't do small cars. And there's also a reason why the Aston Martin Signet had such a mixed set of reviews. If Aston Martin is trying to be luxurious and give you status, why are they making this small car? Small is not rich. Big is rich. At least that's what we humans seem to believe. So of course, if the luxury brands are doing it, then the non-luxury brands want to do it too. Because it at least makes people feel like they look like they're richer. I'm not saying that's for everyone's case. I'm not saying it's conscious or unconscious, but basically, we like big things. Reason number 6, we as humans are actually getting bigger. After World War II, or at least in the UK and some parts of Europe, we had rationing. We started to get bigger and bigger and bigger. With better nutrition, we got taller, and with worse nutrition, we got wider. And some people smashed nutrition and got taller and wider. In 1998, Ford Europe's head of product development, Richard Parry Jones, stated that this was an actual reason why the Ford Focus was so much larger than the Ford Escort that was outgoing at the time. People People were getting bigger, and therefore the cars had to be able to accommodate them and make them feel comfortable as they had always felt in those cars. And of course, if your market is quite wide, you can't just make cars super wide and then not slightly taller because they look out of proportion. And same if someone's really tall, you can't just make the car taller and then leave it skinny. For example, the old Mercedes A-Class, which is not a very nice looking car in my opinion. So yeah, we got bigger, so did our cars. On to number 7 now, and it's kind of related to the bigger being better point. Lots of design trends in the car world have headed down the larger route. One of those, as a good example, is the larger wheels. Designers like having larger wheels in their cars because it makes them look better. I suppose it's kind of like giving your car a really nice pair of shoes. You want them to stand out, you want them to look good. That's why we put nicer alloys on our cars that are slightly bigger. Obviously with bigger wheels you need bigger arches, and as well as that, if you think about it, if you have a wheel that you just make this much bigger, suddenly it looks really spindly from behind, so you need to make it wider too. And if you make it wider, you need to increase the track of the car to make sure that the car can actually turn properly and not lose its turning circle. With all that in mind, the car suddenly just needs to be bigger so that you can fit those nice big alloys on it. This is also relevant to the point around shareholders as well. As I mentioned before, if design trends are heading bigger, then they need to go with that, or maybe find some way of pioneering around that in order to keep their shareholders happy, make money, and look like they're doing their job properly. There are only a couple of car brands that have really been trying to decrease the size of their cars recently, Vauxhall being one of them. They've been trying to keep kind of the same, if not slightly smaller size cars. I respect that going against the curve, but it is a very rogue and bold move. The 8th and final point in this video that I wanted to mention was the US. The United States, or North American car market, is one of the largest in the world. In 2018 in North America, there was almost as many cars sold as the entire of Europe, Middle East, and Africa. That's some pretty insane sales, and for that reason, car manufacturers want to be able to please that specific market. Now in the UK, we struggle with road sizes. They are quite small, and larger cars often get stuck going down them. There was actually a situation recently where a Bentley Continental GT and a Range Rover couldn't pass each other down a street and ended up stuck for about 20 minutes and caused a whole bunch of traffic. In the US, that's far less of a problem. If you go to New York, the roads are wide. If you go to outside of New York, the roads are wide. I mean, there's more to America than New York, and actually no, there's not. In the US, there is only New York and outside of New York. Whatever, ignore what I just said. The key thing is, roads are quite wide in the US, and they are able to accommodate larger cars. Now, it'd be a little bit weird if European car companies made smaller cars, sent them to the US market where they were dealing with the GM kind of cars, where you've got like, I don't know, the Escalades and the F-150s. You put an F-150 against a Mark 1 Golf, the size difference is ridiculous. So in order to make sure they appease that US market as well as being able to appease the European market, they make sure that their cars are sizable enough. If their cars were undersized and still pricey, that's really not a good look for European manufacturers. And in the US, it seems to be a race to get the biggest car. The amount of black SUVs I saw driving around New York whilst I was there earlier in December, mad. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, remember to leave a like, comment as well to let me know your thoughts, and subscribe for more weekly car content. I want to say a massive thank you as always to my patrons for sticking by me for such a long time. Plenty more car videos to come. I'm looking forward to 2020, but as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Listen.